Welcome to the Grace Community Church Sermons Podcast. Each week we share the sermon from this last week's service. We hope this sermon encourages and equips you on your journey to know and follow Jesus Christ. Let's listen in now.
On yonder hill, the darkness flew, the morning broke in light and dew. Day had come again anew, and all we sinners sang. In muck and mire, our wretched souls and falling from the depths below, hell deserved, but there was hope, and all we sinners sang. Say we are saved, the gates of heaven wide open. Saved, we are saved. The keys to the grave have been stolen. What could ever pay the cost on Calvary's hill? There rose a cross. Could it be that evil lost, and all we sinners sang, and all we sinners sang? Say we are saved, the gates of heaven wide open. Say we are saved, the keys to the grave have been stolen. The crimson river like a flood came washing down over all of us. It swallowed sin and death right up, and all we sinners sang. Yes, all we sinners sang. Saved, we are saved. The gates of heaven wide open. Saved, we are saved. The keys to the grave have been stolen. On yonder hill, where darkness flew, the morning breaks in light and dew. Day has come again anew, and all we sinners sing. Blue. Awesome. Okay, the last time I was up here and talked to you, I left you sitting in a tree in the middle of the Big Thompson River Canyon. I was 17 years old. I had just survived one of the deadliest floods in Colorado history. I was in the middle of the river, 20 feet up with my feet in the water. And in many ways, for the next 12 years, I was still in that tree. There were no lessons learned. I continued to be arrogant. I continued to be selfish. I continued to ignore God. I continued, nothing changed, but something did. That flood changed me, but I couldn't articulate it. I was unwilling to look at it. I was unwilling to deal with it. So as I described the first flood, that was God's first 2x4, trying to make a correction. Post-flood, I returned home. I worked the rest of the summer, and I entered my senior year in high school. And I stayed busy with school and work. I was a mechanic in a pro bike shop. We put on races that drew international competitors. I had my photography, my music, and my sound. But no real direction in life. I was floundering in a massive feeling of emptiness, but I didn't want to go there. I kept myself busy with all the things of the world. I lost interest in high school, especially the lunchroom, yada, 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 that goes on. I had no tolerance for any of that, so I kind of just got out of it. Summer came after I graduated. I was still floundering. I still had no direction. I wasn't looking for God. I wasn't paying any attention. I was still in somewhat of a state of shock from that flood. I don't remember much of anything from high school. Sometime about midsummer, I actually applied to college, and by God's grace, I got in. I have no idea to this day why that happened. So, college. The freshman year brought a whole new plethora of challenges and busyness, which I gravitated to. The academics, electrical engineering, electronics, computer science, science itself, software engineering. I did all of that. I was very busy, but it wasn't enough. So I went out and bought myself a van and put together a fairly good-sized sound system, and I started DJing. And that kept me busy all weekends too. Still not paying attention. Spring of that year, my freshman year, I had been recruited by my dorm to provide the DJ services for free, which is okay. So we set it up, and they had a mixer going on, and this young lady from my English class came and sat in the lounge. So I decided I'd turn everything over to my buddies who had a great time running the DJ system, and I approached her to ask her to dance. And as I approached her, she started talking to her friend from her dorm, and I'm thinking this is going pretty well. So as I later found out, what she was saying to her friend is, "We have to leave now." Apparently, my first impression from the English class didn't go over so well. So trapped, she had very little option. She agreed to dance with me, and we danced a little bit, and then we found a quiet space in the dorm, and we talked. We talked for 3 or 4 hours. And her name was Linda. And as she says, has called it, she says that was the beginning of the conversation. And that conversation has lasted until this day. But it almost didn't. Not because of Linda, but because of this idiot. I still wasn't looking for God. I was just filling in my time. A little later on in life, she told me that when she was a teenager, mid-teens or whatever, she prayed to God for someone to come into her life. And then she says, poof, you appeared. I couldn't let that one go by. So my response to her was, that proves one thing conclusively. God has a fantastic sense of humor. Beginning of the second lesson. No real change. Something was still missing, filling in time, wasn't paying attention. I filled up my time with just the things of the world. Sometime sophomore year, same as freshman year, somewhere in my junior year, toward the end, I developed lesions in both axillae, which is under the armpits, chest cavity here. And I also had one start on my, as Forrest Gump would say, buttocks. And they seeped pus and liquid. They were sore and they were open. The school medical services said I had a sweat gland infection. Okay, that's all well and good, but there's no sweat gland on my hiney end. So, okay, there's a problem here. But anyway, they told me to use some antibacterial soap, and I did my thing. I tried to ignore it, thinking I'm in control. Hey, I can handle this, not a problem. The lesions continued to increase in size and density. They started getting hard. There were lumps under both axillae and on the back end. After the school year ended, still not paying attention. I went back home working, no improvement, so I saw my GP. He said, you have an infection. Okay. No, poor repeat here. And he referred me to a surgeon. No medical testing was done. Surgeon said, we know what this is. You have an infection. We have to go in and clean it out. The first surgery was performed in the fall of 1980. They took me in, they cut me open, they cleaned it all out, they sewed me back together, just the axillae. They ignored the one on the back end. And they let me go. Okay. Back at school, my senior year, the lesions and lumps leaking returned, larger and more aggressive. They came back really fast. Consulted, I still wasn't listening, but something was seriously wrong, something was seriously missing, but I wasn't paying attention. Looking back, it's incredible that I was that dense, but I was. I consulted the surgeons again. This time, they were in for a more radical procedure, which was going to require 2 separate surgeries during my stay. They're going to open me up, they're going to drain me, they're going to pack me with gauze, then they're going to remove the gauze and let me sit open for 15 days in the hospital, being irrigated every couple hours to prevent infections. Pastor Gary last week mentioned that pain is a great motivator. And that's absolutely true, but you have to be paying attention and listening. I wasn't, but I was about to find out. They took me in, they cut me open, they cleaned it out, and they packed it with gauze. A day or so later, the nurses came in. And just to set the record straight, people think doctors run hospitals. The nurses run the hospitals. They know what's going on. So they came in. The head nurse came in with the surgeon's instructions on how to get me unpacked. She read through them. She gasped. Now, when your nurse gasps, you're in deep. She took the orders over to the other 2 nurses, and they pretty much did the same thing. And I thought, I'm in trouble. She comes back to me and says, the doctors say we're pulling all this gauze out dry. If you've ever had a scab or a wound and you bandaged it, and what does a scab do? It adheres to the bandage when you pull it off. Lots of fun. They started the removal process. Within seconds, I saw white. Have you ever had white pain? It's your brain shutting down because of the pain. And they kept going, and they kept going, and they kept going. And at one point, one of the nurses said, "How much is there?" And the other one said, "I don't know, I can't see the bottom." 20 minutes. I almost passed out 3 or 4 times. I was sweating like a pig. I was shaking uncontrollably. They finally got done. They'd removed 80 feet of 3-inch gauze from one side. They gave me about 10 minutes to recoup, which was nowhere near enough. Melt, pour, repeat on the other side. I almost passed out again. That was more pain than I've ever had in my life. It took me hours to recover. They finally got that done, and then we went into the drainage period for about 12, 15 days. I don't quite remember. And then that was followed by the final closed procedure, which was they sew you up, then they take a skin graft from here to here, 5 inches wide, and they put skin back under where they hacked everything out. If you ever had a skin graft done, it's raw nerves. So even a bed sheet feels like someone's cutting you. And it takes months to heal. Even after that attention-getting pain motivation, John wasn't listening. I started questioning the surgeons about their diagnosis. And they told me, basically, "Shut up and sit down, kid. You don't know what you're talking about." So, okay. During this time in the hospital, still thinking I was in control, but clearly in a free fall, I started praying for the first time in years, but it was the same prayers I had in that tree in the Big Thompson River Canyon. I didn't know God. I was just wanted out of I was in deep. I wanted out. And he graciously saved me from that river. And now I'm in deep again, asking for help, though I definitely had not earned anything. I was vaguely aware I was metaphorically still in that tree. Nothing had really changed. Since the first lesson, I was still totally out of control, meandering through life. I still wasn't listening, and totally tone deaf. I left school one class short of my degree because of health issues and money. I found a job as an industrial engineer and started working and taking a class at Cuyahoga Community College to complete the degree. Upon Linda's graduation, we were in the same class. Linda and I reached an impasse in our relationship. She found a teaching job in Houston, Texas, as there were not many opportunities in Ohio. And I, being a stubborn idiot, still thinking I was in control, was not willing to commit to her. She left for Texas for the 81-82 school year. Probably intent to move on with her life. The conversation was muted. The lesions, masses, and leakage returned again, growing faster than ever before, much more aggressive. Their motion was restricted. I couldn't sit. The lumps were so large. Back to the surgeons. Melt, pour, repeat of the second set of procedures. Total of 5 surgeries. Same pain, same drill. I still wasn't listening. As I was recovering after the second skin graft, which came off the other thigh, so I have a matching set now, the head nurse came in, not the surgeons. And the nurse told me they're referring me to an oncologist. Apparently, it dawned on someone the diagnosis in a year of my life and 5 surgeries was the incorrect diagnosis. I suspect someone did a biopsy, but I can't prove that. The oncologist met with me, was a young doctor from India. He was current on all the latest medical procedures and drugs and everything else. He came in, he reviewed my case, he looked at me, and he says, I think I know what you have, but I need some more diagnostics. So me being the jerk, I asked him, okay, how much pain is involved? He said, can you lay an x-ray table for 20 minutes and not move? I said, I can do that. And that's what we did. The x-ray table is actually a newfangled gadget at the time called a CT scanner. It gave them a 3D image of what was going on. He comes back and he lets me know. The hard masses and sores and leakage and the seeping are called granulomas. A granuloma is a benign, non-cancerous collection of immune cells, white cells produced by my autoimmune immune system in response to an invading entity, either external or internal. The root cause of the invading entity was Hodgkin's lymphoma. The pathway was a lymphatic system left untreated. The prognosis was death. I started chemotherapy in the summer of 1982. Still not listening, still not paying attention, still doing it my way. I can control this, I can handle it. It's amazing when you're in a free fall, you don't even know it till you hit the ground. The drugs that treat leukemia and lymphoma are extremely strong. They are brutal poisoning of your body. After my weekly treatments, they pumped this stuff into my arm. By the time I got home, I looked like Frankenstein. You could see every vein in my arm, my chest, my neck. You could feel it coursing through your body as it burned. You can feel it. It's poison. I was in another deluge. This one wasn't a river. This wasn't the Big Thompson River that was a river of death that night. This was a river of chemicals that were also death. This was the beginning of a 4-year ordeal every week for 4 years. The chemo poison would either kill me or the cancer cells. The race was on. I took chemo treatments Friday afternoon to minimize the impact to my work schedule because I had to have insurance and I had to work. Weekends were 2 days of recovery. I felt like I was hit by a truck every Friday and the guy backed up over me again and finished the job. But to God's glory, the treatments started working. The granulomas decreased in size. The lesions healed up, but still playing the fool and not listening and totally undeserving. God, once again, was watching over me, and I have no idea why. Did not deserve that. Life was lonely. Living away from family, I had an apartment near my job. I worked, slept, and did the chemo routine. It slowly occurred to me that I had been a total fool for not committing to Linda, the love of my life. I called her one evening, apologized, and asked her to come back to Ohio so we could be married. Linda loves children and desired to have a family. She said yes, knowing full well that we would never be able to have children of our own due to the damage of the chemo treatments. In addition, other life-changing side effects, damage to the heart, liver, lungs, etc., were strong possibilities. I could also ultimately lose the chemo poison race. Linda returned to Ohio at the end of May of 1982. The conversation was restored. My father died August 21st, 1982, of a massive heart attack at age 66. We saw him in the morning, ran some errands, came back, and he was gone. The chemo treatments ended in 86. There have been no recurrences, praise the Lord. Again, God spared this arrogant, undeserving wretch. I still thought I was in control, though it was obvious I was in a free fall and cracks were showing everywhere. I still wasn't listening. And that God void in my heart and soul was growing larger. But God in His infinite mercy and wisdom was not finished with me yet. The third and final to date, 2x4, but this one's going to be an 8x8. Correction was soon to begin. Psalms 59, 16 through 17. But I will sing of your power. Yes, I will sing aloud of your mercy in the morning. For you have been my defense and my refuge in my day of trouble. To you, O my strength, I will sing praises, for God is my defense, my God of mercy. The third lesson. You would have thought I would have learned. No. Still arrogant, still doing my thing. It had been such a flaming success by that point. Who could have changed? It's an idiot. Okay, by the grace of God, I was delivered from the flood and from the Hodgkin's lymphoma. I should not be here. After ignoring both of those messages, I was sent yet another one. Isaiah 41:10. Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. Yes, I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. The third application of God's attention getting 8x8. The economy in 86 was rough. Tech jobs are hard to find. I worked for a number of small businesses and several startups that went belly up. Still no real direction. Still not paying attention. Still not listening. Doing it my way to a disastrous fail. Still chasing the empty promises of this world. I joined a company in Cuyahoga Falls that specialized in electrical controls, software control of large steel stamping and blanking equipment. I worked locally for them for about a year in Ohio, Michigan, and PA. Things just kind of cruised along, but once again, no real direction. A client company customer of this company I was working for, based in Chicago, was in the process with our company of commissioning 2 large transfer feed presses in Ulsan, South Korea. Transfer feed presses are massive hammers. The small one was 2,700 metric ton. The other one was 3,500 metric ton. They move 30-ton dies, 6 or 8 of them at a time. My immediate supervisor at this company, I worked with a little bit during that year. He had been sent over there. His name was Frank. Frank was a devout Christian. Frank had a wonderful wife and 2 little kids, and he'd been away for a number of months straight. I was told he was coming home with no details, and I was being sent over there to replace him. This was going to be a multi-month deployment, 7,000 miles from home. Linda would be left on her own. I flew into Ulsan Airport. It's about the size of Akron Fulton. Surrounding the airport were farm fields, oxen pulling plows, people working with hand tools, thatched huts where they lived. These are the homes of the farmers and where they kept their animals. It was surreal. It was third world. I'd just come out of Seoul, a modern city, and now I'm in the third world. The South Koreans at the time referred to Ulsan as the armpit of Korea, and I was about ready to find out why. My manager, Frank, he met me at the airport and drove me back to the hotel that the team was staying at. And over dinner, he started explaining the reason he was leaving. The project was not going well. Over budget, long delays, mainly because of Hyundai, but they were attempting to blame it on the client company in Chicago. He was away from his family with little contact. We were allowed one 10-minute phone call a week to talk to our loved ones. That phone call ran $50. That's in $1980. There was no such thing as a cell phone. A letter took 2 weeks one way. You were totally on your own. As a Christian, from Frank, the Ulsan environment was treacherous. The main street between the hotel and the plant was a continuous line of shops and what the Koreans called stand-up bars. Translation, brothels. The stand-up bars were often the only source of food after normal working hours, and they also catered to other desires. Abject poverty meant young people had to leave their families to work at an early age. Many of the girls in these stand-up bars were 15, 16, 17 years of age. The boys could find work in menial labor, and you saw that all the time. They were pushing brooms or whatever needed to be done. The girls went to the bars. The game was short-term. The girls would make enough money in a day to eat. Long-term, they were looking for a guy that would marry them and get them back to the States or wherever they're coming from. We had teams working there from all over the world. Divorce among the married men was almost 100%. About half of our team was married. All except Frank, they all had girlfriends. All the unmarried members had girlfriends. Frank said he just could no longer live like that. The temptations were huge, and he was not going to sacrifice his soul or his marriage or his children for that. He left. He then left the company. As I found out, it was worse than Frank had described. Frank had not been able to bring the Koreans under control. They pulled him into meetings, all-day meetings, with 40 of them in a tight, sealed-up room, all chain smoking. And then they blamed him for not getting anything done. I think my boss, our CEO, put me there because after spending the time in the river and 5 years of dealing with the lymphoma, I had a different attitude. I still do. I have no tolerance whatsoever for the malarkey that they were doing. And I immediately started using the one word in the English language that is never used enough, and that's no. I told them what I was doing, get out of the way. And we started moving the project forward. We took the punch list, we started getting it going. Things were moving again, the team was working together. But there's a cost. It didn't take me long to figure out that the trappings of Ulsan would be a death knell to my marriage and probably my soul. I had a sense of this. I still wasn't committing. Like I didn't commit to Linda, I didn't commit to Christ. I was ignoring it. Still thinking I was in control. Plant conditions were perilous. Equipment safeties were deliberately disabled to speed up production. Amputations of digits, arms, and hands were common among the operators. One of our operators, Mr. Lee, a great guy, he didn't show up for work one day, which was really strange because there was no such thing as paid time off. There's no such thing as paid time, sick time. It didn't exist. No work, no pay. The following day, he was back, absent his arm from the elbow down on his right hand. He still had a bloody stump, but he's back at work because he had to eat. Safeties in general, just common sense safeties, didn't exist. The Koreans would shut all the lights off in the plant at night if they weren't running any production. And it was dark. There were no exit signs. There was nothing. It was just black. So I came in one night. I was working nights. I came around the back of the big press, no lights on. But I knew where the column was, and I was just headed for the front where the switches were so I could get some lights on so I could work. As I came around the front of the plant, front of that press, it didn't sound right. And it didn't look right. It was winter, it was overcast outside, there was no light anywhere. And I just stopped. And I backed up, I went back to the other side of the press, to another column, turned the lights on behind the press, then came back around. Maintenance had removed all the floor plates around the press. These presses are 4 stories, they go down 4 stories below ground, they go 4 stories above ground. The floor plates are at the normal floor level. They removed them all the way around. No barricades, no lighting, no nothing. It was a 4-story drop to death at the bottom. I was within about 3 feet of taking that plunge. Hyundai workers went on strike while we were there. It's quite a sight to see 30,000 people in the streets protesting. There's an office building, a Hyundai office building across from a hotel. I could throw a stone and hit it. They were protesting over there, and it turned into a riot. And they had a number of people on the 5th story on the roof throwing cement blocks over to the crowd below. They killed 3 or 4 people, injured dozens. Once again, I thought I was in control. I can handle this, but I still wasn't listening. I was working 12 to 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, nights, attempting to handle things my way again. I did a self-imposed isolation. I basically worked, slept, and read, and the reading kept my mind from thinking about the stand-up bars and the other trappings. It's amazing to be in a city of almost 500,000 people and be totally alone. Still something missing, and that emptiness was gnawing at me every day. I was still in that tree in the river, from the River Canyon 12 years after the fact. Nothing had changed in 12 years. About 1.5 months in, I had consumed all the available books in English I could find, including, I hate to admit this, many of the contractors were from Texas, and they all brought up their basically spaghetti Western dime store novels that were bad the first time. You don't want to read them again. So anyway, I was going stir crazy, and there was too much time. I couldn't fill in, and the stand-up bars were calling. But I knew that was death in another way. One night after a really long shift, in desperation, I started searching every drawer and every piece of furniture in my room. It was a long stay room. There was lots of couches and stuff in the room. It was intended basically as a home away from home. I searched everything, and then I noted that there was, way in the corner, behind a couch I never used, there was a little lampstand with 4 drawers in it. I started at the top drawer and worked down. I opened the bottom drawer. There was a book, a Gideon's New Testament. I stared at that Bible. I picked it up, and I just stared at it for minutes. And I knew the great epiphany. This was it. This is what I had been missing all my life. I turned to Matthew 1:1 and started to read. I was in another deluge. But this time, it was a crimson river of light, life, and salvation. Unlike the other 2 deluges, which were death, this was life. The filling of that God void in me was underway. First time in my life. And what I've been seeking for 12 years. In the next month and a half, before exiting South Korea for visa reasons, I read that New Testament through 3 times. Dawn had broken over Marblehead, and I was finally out of the Big Thompson River Canyon tree. I was now immersed in the river of life, clinging to my Redeemer, Christ, and his tree, the cross. Everything changed. There was purpose. There was genuine prayer. There was a relationship with my Creator. There was a realization that I am not in control, and it's by God's grace and mercy that I'm even here. For I did not deserve, nor could I earn the gift of salvation. There was a peace. There was the rock, Christ, on which I stood, and I finally knew I wasn't alone. I rotated out of South Korea to comply with visa regulations, and after a few weeks I returned, bringing, at that time, a very little used New King James Bible. Before the end of the project, at the end of '88, I had read that Bible through multiple times. Old Testament, New Testament, melt, pour, repeat. I could never get enough. And every time I read it, there were more epiphanies. It's inexhaustible. Nothing since that day has ever been the same. The aftermath, the damage to the team was extensive. Of the 11 members I knew were married, Frank and I were the only ones to return to our spouses and families with our marriages intact. Others had divorced or were in the process of divorcing their spouses prior to the end of the project. Some of the members were in their 50s and had been married for decades and had grown children. we started reducing the number of team members as the project wound down, which is normal. We had I finally got the Koreans to sign off on the presses, and we were moving to wrap things up. One member, a contractor that had worked for the company I was working for, he'd been carrying on with a 17-year-old for months. And I didn't even know I found out he was married. I had no idea. When he was being let go, he went out and found more work in Korea and bought it and had an apartment where he and his girlfriend were living. When you travel overseas, you're always given a round-trip ticket. So he had a ticket back to the U.S. that he used after we let him go. He flew back. He actually lived in Ravenna, Ohio, which is something I didn't know. This is amazing. He went to his home where his wife and 3 children were living. He walked in, went to various rooms, picked up whatever he wanted. And as he was walking out, his wife, holding a newborn baby he had never seen, with both kids, his older kids, in the room, looked at her and said, "I'm getting a divorce." And he walked out. She was devastated, of course. So she marched into Cuyahoga Falls to the corporate headquarters and demanded to see the CEO and asked him what happened. I then received a phone call asking the same question, and I told him. Lives ruined, families destroyed, betrayal. Praise of the Lord stayed with me. The Bible reading has not stopped. I've read constantly since the day of the Epiphany in South Korea. Multiple dozen readings, cover to cover, of various versions and chronological and everything else. I've been working through commentaries, etc. I can never get enough. If I go more than a day or so, I feel like I'm lost. I follow all the cross references. I call them rabbit holes because I can go in a rabbit hole and be there for 2 months before I come back out. But it's glorious. It's absolutely glorious because every time I read it, that void is being filled. And that void is infinite. It's not finite. It's infinite. It's as big as God. And I will never live long enough to fully fill it. It'll be filled when I see Christ. What I learned from God's word is inexhaustible. With any luck, this is still in tune. Like a deer panting for the water, I was thirsting for so long, I was so dry. So I set out on my journey, not sure just what I'd find. but I found an everlasting river of life. Ooh, it's like falling rain. I will never thirst again. Living water, bread of life, come and quench this thirst within me. Feel this hunger deep inside. For so long I have been empty, nothing else will satisfy. You alone are what I needed, Lord. Living water, bread of life. I had searched this whole world over for the answer, wanting just to fill this void inside. All the things that were material, it could not satisfy. For my hungering was for the bread of life. Ooh, came my manna from above. I can never get enough. Living water, bread of life, come and quench the thirst within me. Feel this hunger deep inside. For so long I have been empty, nothing else will satisfy. You alone are what I needed, Lord. Living water, bread of life. Living water, bread of life. Living water, bread of life.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's message. If you want further information about Grace Community Church, you can visit us at gccofalliance.org. Also note, the video for this message, for this sermon, is linked in the details below. Have a great day.